this way and then that way. So anyway, it was we were glad to get them out there because the old, if anybody's been by there and seen the old Martinelli Winery barn is leaning, and probably what's holding it up is one of the trees on the east side. The whole building is leaning over, and one side is kind of going down. So I thought it'd be nice to get these out of there before the building comes down and wrecks them, you know. But because on top they crushed the grapes, they had this hopper, and then they had a belt. The belt went way up into the top, in the second floor. It was kind of neat the way they had it. And up there they have these little wooden troughs, and the wooden trough would go, I guess, white grapes in one place, go to all these different tanks, and they had it set up kind of like you'd run water into different fields. They had it all set up with grapes. We do the same thing, go into their open top fermenters. So that's why we couldn't lift up too high, because that's all original wood that they got off the property. They use these poles. They're probably 10-inch poles that they use to support the building and for over the top also. Oh, that's better.
And those poles are like trees that they just took the limbs off, and I have pictures of them. They're just trees that are used as like beams. And you're like, oh, those are all trees on that side.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So what they do when they use those trees is they take the sapwood off, because the sapwood is the softest. You know, it's that white wood on redwood, and it deteriorates and bugs get into it. So they take their hand hews and clean it all off, so there's no sapwood all down the heartwood, and then that stays, you know, a lot longer. And I mean, you know, the building's 110 years old and it's still up. I mean, it would take very little to cable it and straighten it out, but nobody's done that. So anyway, okay, have any thoughts, questions?
Did white and red go into the barrels back then? So
Yeah.
it wasn't just like a red wine barrel. They would
Well,
use it for both.
If you used it for red, you wouldn't put white in it, but you could have been using it for white for some years and then put red.
Red in it,
But you
okay.
can't, you wouldn't go from, because if you put white in a red barrel, you start to get some leakage coming out and start to discolor your white wine.
So how many
Maybe that's how they did a rosé.
how many total barrels did you have? I mean,
Well,
what was their production here? You had how many barrels?
Well, there's two of these that were, like I said, they were just identical twins. And then there was at least 2 or 3 more that were larger than this.
Larger.
They were
And
larger
what
than
does this hold?
1,180 gallons.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So when I figured that out, how many tons was that?
You said 4? Back 4?
4 tons.
Back 4 tons.
Yeah, gallons. You could say the gallon is 165 gallons per ton, so 165 into 1,100. Paul, what would that be, real quick?
It'd be about 8 tons, I think.
Anybody? But so it's quite it's a few. And then they had the open top fermenters. You know, there's quite a few of those in there, and they're really big. So yeah, there might be 10 or 12.
So did they get grapes from everywhere, or everybody, or
No, I think it was their own.
they grew all their own?
Yeah, they had. Excuse me. They had Jackass Hill, and Jackass Hill, the part that we have, that was the start of it, and then it went through the fence, which is all wooded now. You know, it's a forest. And it went clear up, went clear to the top of that hill. Then it turned and started down. And my grandfather passed away at that point, and that's where it ended. You know, nobody else pursued it. But what he was going to do is continue down the other ridge, all the way down to Martinelli Road, where so the winery set here, you know, the winery set here, and this is Jackass Hill. And it went all the way up and part way down, and he was going to come all the way down the other side. So it'd be just kind of around the winery. So when he passed away, it stopped. And then below Jackass Hill, they had some more vineyard that they used. And then, of course, they had Jackass Vineyard. Jackass Vineyard was planted before Jackass Hill was. So he bought that property with grapes already on it. So it's like, 130, 35 years old. So it's a little older than Jackass Hill. So that's where most all of his grapes came from. And then down below, the little block of Evo, which has got a lot of different varieties in it. Some came off of that. And then, of course, next to us, going down to Martinelli Road, my uncle's property, and they had those grapes there also. But they usually didn't put any grapes in the flat. Everything was on a hill. So you just figured the flat was good for corn, you know, to feed the cows and pigs and the prunes. They had a lot of prunes down in the flat. And so they had dried prunes, and they take the prunes and concentrate those into alcohol.
He looks at you. He didn't want to say it 'cause he
I was
found
gonna say you're like not sure that you should say that out loud.
I told Julie so many years not to say it. You know, you don't just say what they did back then. You know. So I was supposed to be speaking. She was supposed to be speaking over at Hopkiln Winery. They had a big group, and so was trying to get me to go over there and talk. And I decided, no, I didn't want to. It was deer season. I wanted to go. But she actually had a foot was bothering her or something, so she was on crutches. So that terrible me to go over there and give that speech. So she was over there, and I went later, but I went in the back. There's a big fence between it. And so I was in the back listening to her, and she was telling them all about what they did. You know, if my dad was here, he would really be upset. I'm not supposed to be saying this, and I was on the other side of the fence. I didn't say anything, I left.
Well, and there used to be a still underneath, or beside the winery, underneath the pig pen. So between the barrels, you could crawl through and get to the still that they used to have during Prohibition. And it was underneath the pig pen so that the authorities wouldn't find it.
Underneath.
And then at some point, it collapsed, but it was dug out.
Yeah, they had the door. I guess they had the door so wide and filled it with dirt. So because the revenuers, they tapped on everything and checked it out. So they'd hit on these doors, and it was solid. It was like there's dirt behind it, so they had no thought. But in time it did collapse. But the revenuers are pretty sharp because people were doing stills. So you had to have water to cool the still down because it goes into to humidify it, and then you got to cool it, condense it into droplets, so then the alcohol comes out. So you had to have this water all the time to cool the head of the still. And so they found out that what people were doing is they were taking it into their barns because the revenuers were flying over, and they could tell if they saw a building, just a regular barn, that had no frost on it in the early morning. They knew there was heat going on in there, and they were making some whiskey brandy. So then the people moved it into the dairies, into their dairy barns, because they have the animals in